Anyone who thinks that the violence that has escalated visibly over the last 3 days, becoming truly chaotic anarchy in different parts of the country, was an organic protest against Agnipath is living in a fool's paradise. And I wish you well for your blindness or your willful blindness, because there were parts of what has happened over the last 18 hours that can only be called criminal action. This was a riot, viewer, and let's not be silly, let's not be stupid, let's not be so dense that we can't call out what we see right in front of our eyes. And here on India First, we're going to tell you, not only do we think that this was a large-scale riot in different parts of the country, not all of it, but much of it was a riot, we're also going to show you proof that this is organized, this is being mobilized on WhatsApp groups, and there are dark instigators behind what's happening. I'm Shiv Aroor. These are the headlines. Friday fire and fury on the streets against the government's Agnipath scheme becomes the big headline focus. Protests break out in UP, Bihar and even Telangana. Trains set ablaze, stones pelted at police and civilians. Navy chief assures agitating youth on Agnipath benefits. Amit Shah, Rajnath Singh reach out to Agnipath protesters. BJP says opposition fanning protests for political gains. Congress demands rollback of the scheme. CBI raids Rajasthan Chief Minister Ashok Gehlot's brother Agrasen Gehlot, who's been accused of exporting subsidized fertilizers between 2007 and 2009. Congress accuses the BJP of what else? Vendetta. Defence Minister Rajnath Singh says assembly elections in J&K by end of this year likely, says strong possibility of electoral process kicking off before 2023. Streets submerged in water, massive power blackouts, deluge leaves trail of destruction in Assam, claims 8 lives. India Today, the only channel covering the situation in Assam. That the violence that has been perpetrated in different parts of the country is part of a conspiracy. For instance, a WhatsApp group has now revealed the conspiracy that was hatched in Kanpur in Uttar Pradesh. A screenshot of a WhatsApp group, Boycott Tour of Duty, has just been infiltrated by India Today's reporters. We've gotten screenshots of this particular WhatsApp group. The Kanpur police have identified 247 miscreants who are members of this group and believe that this could be proof of the organized manner in which rioting has been planned, how railway stations are being targeted, how certain locations are being identified for large-scale violence and vandalisms. 7 cell phone numbers have been tracked down by the Kanpur police as well, and an investigation is on. Boycott Tour of Duty. Tour of Duty, remember, was the earlier name of the Agnipath scheme, and this WhatsApp group with hundreds of people in it is understood to be where violence and rioting has been mobilized in a disturbingly organized manner.
छात्रों ने, लड़कों ने एक ग्रुप बना रखा था जिसमें कानपुर में प्रदर्शन और कानपुर में हिंसक प्रदर्शन की बात कर रहे थे। पूछताछ जारी है और मेरा विश्वास है कि इन लड़कों से वो सारी सूचनाएं मिल जाएंगी और साथ ही ऐसे और भी लोग जो कि इनको प्रोवोक कर रहे हैं, इनसे जुड़े हुए हैं, इनके पीछे खड़े हैं, उन सारे चेहरों को भी पहचानने में हमें मदद मिल जाएगी। किसी भी ऐसे व्यक्ति को जो इस गहरी साजिश का हिस्सा है, हम उसको सामने ले आएंगे और उस पर आवश्यक कार्यवाही करेंगे।
I want to go across to India Today. Simar Chavla joining me live from Kanpur. Simar, a WhatsApp group called Boycott Tour of Duty, understood to be where the planning, mobilization, identification of targets is taking place. This one in Kanpur. What is the police saying? This is about some kind of violence that is expected to happen tomorrow?
Well, Shiv, if we talk about the particular chats that have been accessed by India today, it clearly shows that this whole violence was being organized just a day back. Let me just tell my viewers that this particular chat is of 11 p.m. of yesterday. That means the planning of today's violence was being done a day before. Now, as per the Kanpur police, they acted firmly in this very manner, swiftly in this very particular manner. That's why this violence didn't happen in Kanpur, but as far as other areas are concerned, we saw certain areas, which were in the middle of the violence. Now the police states that there were certain members who were running this very particular WhatsApp group, and there are several WhatsApp groups running like this in the whole city. Several people are under the scanner of Kanpur police. The action has been taken. 4 people have been detained, and 12 people more have been identified in this very particular case. Now more arresting, is likely to take place. The questioning of 4th accused is already happening. And in some time we might be, likely having some of the response on the official response on the arrest of these very particular people. Now, let me just tell you, if we talk about the content of this very particular chats, it's clearly the people are talking that let's burn the police station or Rama Devi. Let's block this very particular highway. So the conspiracy, the whole violence that erupted in Kanpur, in different parts of the UP, was being managed a day before. So clearly, strict vigil has been increased by several administrations on the WhatsApp groups, because a pattern has emerged in which we are seeing that certain violence were being, perpetrated, were being organized through these WhatsApp groups. Now we'll be seeing a close vigil on this very particular WhatsApp groups in different parts of the UP. And yes, action is being taken, and more action is expected in the upcoming time after these people and other people will be identified.
And it's reasonable to believe that if, one particular WhatsApp group has been intercepted in this manner and preempted violence that, may have otherwise taken place in Kanpur as well, similar WhatsApp groups are likely to have been behind the violence that took place successfully and so disturbingly in other parts of UP, also in Bihar notably, and most definitely in Telangana. Simar, breaking that story first and exclusive here on India Today. That gives you a real indication of how things are being organized and run. It's not organic. It's not like people are suddenly deciding to descend onto the streets and protest. It's a very organized way. Targets are identified, railway stations are identified, train timings are put over there so they know trains are available, and that's how things escalated to such a degree today. Tech coming to the aid of criminal elements who have given legitimate protesters, if any, anywhere else, a truly, truly bad name. They've hijacked this entire protest and made it national anarchy and a riot. For the 3rd day in a row, huge protests. You couldn't have missed the images. Were held across the country over the Agnipath scheme. From Bihar and Telangana to Uttar Pradesh, protesters took to the streets and went on a violent, rioting rampage. Arson, stone pelting, huge destruction of public property, train burning took center stage in the name of youth protesting against Agnipath. But India clearly knew that this wasn't just a protest. In Kanpur, WhatsApp group, like we just showed you, brought to light clear evidence that these protests have been carefully orchestrated and organized. Calls to burn down a police station were made. Plans to block a national highway were hatched in these WhatsApp groups named Boycott Tour of Duty, and that's just one of them. You can imagine how many there are across 20 rioting locations in the country. There are at least 240 people who are on this group plotting and planning the violent protests which would have otherwise happened in the city of Kanpur, which has already seen tension recently owing to the protests over Nupur Sharma's remarks and then the bulldozer action. The Kanpur police have taken very serious note. A crackdown is underway with at least 4 accused, as Simar was telling us, arrested so far in this conspiracy, with more likely to be arrested very soon. Kanpur was saved from any violence as a result of this police action.
3 जून को जुमे की नमाज के बाद की गई हिंसा के पीछे एक गहरी साजिश थी। कुछ ऐसी ही साजिश एक बार फिर कानपुर में हिंसा भड़काने की गई। टीओडी के नाम से बनाए गए इस व्हाट्सएप ग्रुप के जरिए छात्रों को भड़काने, हिंसा करने और आगजनी की कोशिश करवाई गई। हालांकि कानपुर पुलिस ने इस व्हाट्सएप ग्रुप के जरिए उस पूरी साजिश को बेनकाब किया है। 200 से ज्यादा लोग कानपुर पुलिस के रडार पर हैं। एक बार फिर कानपुर में हिंसा भड़काने की इस नाकाम कोशिश की तहकीकात में कानपुर पुलिस लगी हुई है। कानपुर के सीनियर अफसरों का कहना है कि छात्रों को भड़काने के पीछे कुछ ऐसे साजिशकर्ता शामिल हैं, कुछ ऐसे संगठन शामिल हैं जो चाहते हैं कि अमन चैन बरकरार न रहे और कानून व्यवस्था बिगड़ी रहे। बहरहाल ऐसे तमाम लोगों के ऊपर कानपुर पुलिस की निगाह है और उनके ऊपर जल्द कार्रवाई की जाएगी।
Were these riots following a toolkit? Let's be very clear that they must have. In many of these places, there were legitimate protesters, army aspirants with a latent anger over unemployment and uncertainty over Agnipath, fueled by misinformation, protesting in a legitimate manner. There was nothing wrong with that. But the escalation in violence has led to strong suspicions that there was a toolkit. There was an organized manner in which youngsters were being manipulated and criminal elements were coming in. Proof number one, there was an organized escalation, organized eruption of protests in different places at the same time. How did it happen? Literally at the same time. Proof number two, army aspirants are unlikely to turn on public property, damage and burn trains. I, for one, refuse to believe that anyone wanting to join the Indian Army, no matter how angry they are, will damage public property. It's impossible. I refuse to believe that. There may be some bad apples, certainly not in this widespread manner with 10 trains burnt. Proof number three, clear instructions to target trains and stations. It was a pattern. There was a clear playbook to what was happening. Proof number four, many protesters were clearly not our army aspirants, and this is what I've been trying to say all along, all day today. I mean, I'm sorry, but I cannot believe that all of the people there were army aspirants, and by the end of the day, I'd like to go ahead and say that most of the people involved were not defense aspirants. These were thugs and lumpen elements who are trying to, get a pot shot at the government under the guise of anger over Agnipath. Proof number five, political student wings clearly infiltrated these protests. Many of them have tried to deny it. They've been attacking us on social media. But the proof is there. We know which student wings of which parties infiltrated these protests, especially in Telangana. Proof number six, WhatsApp groups like we've just shown you proof of, with target and assembly instructions. That wouldn't happen otherwise. This was clearly something that was well thought through, premeditated. It took 3 days to get everyone together, and the real violence was visible today. So that's a few pieces of proof and a bit to think about when you consider and wonder whether these are real protests happening. Meanwhile, Bihar is the epicenter of these protests. It's the place where the largest number of rioting has happened, from vandalism to train bogies being burned. Protesters went on a truly terrifying day-long rampage today. Here's the first ground report from Danapur and Patna showing the aftermath of the violence. India Today's Mausami Singh got on to one of those trains where the fire had finally been put out.
We are inside Farakka Express at the Danapur railway station in Patna, and the entire train has turned into ashes. You can see smoke, embers still there. The administration, in fact, trying real hard to douse the fire that this entire train caught. And you can see not one, not two, almost 6 to 7 compartments were enveloped in flames from the morning till the evening. They've been trying to douse the fire, but importantly, you see that there is a lot of tension, there is a lot of anger that is prevailing on ground zero that we saw in the morning, and with a Bandh being called in Patna, it is unlikely that trouble for the administration or the protests are going to die down anytime soon. And especially, with the railways being targeted across this entire state, Patna remains the hotspot of this entire protest over the Agnipath scheme. With video journalist Sanjay, this is Mausami Singh in Danapur for India Today.
Today was the third day of the protests, but the third day meant that the protests became almost entirely criminal rioting. Anger over Agnipath continued to explode, but it became criminal action. Angry aspirants, infiltrated by thugs and political elements, resorted to arson, train burning, violence and vandalism. At least 10 trains have been almost completely destroyed in Bihar. Children have been terrorized in their stranded school buses. Parents and toddlers have been caught in stone-pelting crossfires. You may wonder whether this is a legitimate protest, but please look at these images.
3 days after Army's Agnipath recruitment scheme was announced, protests, arson, vandalism continue across the country. Angry aspirants stormed the railway station at Bihar in Uttar Pradesh and set fire to a train station there. This after breaking shops and benches while they engaged in violent clashes with the police. Protesters also burned train coaches and tires and raised slogans against the government in Buxar and Prayagraj. Buses were torched and cars were smashed on the Yamuna Expressway in Kapal as vehicles were stuck, leading to a massive traffic jam. Bihar, which witnessed some of the worst violence and arson in the last 2 days, continued to simmer.
The violence is being reported at many places, and railway stations, trains are emerging as the soft target. And here you can see live pictures here that how this train, the Aroor Patna passenger train, is burning here. It has been set on fire and only goes on to show the situation on the ground.
In Samastipur, an entire train was reduced to ashes. At least 9 trains were torched across the state, including in Begusarai, Lakhisarai, Buxar, Ara and Danapur.
दानापुर के प्लेटफॉर्म नंबर 3 पर और जहां पर खड़ी है ये फरक्का एक्सप्रेस, जो जिसके 3 बोगी पूरी तरह से जलकर खाक हो चुके हैं। आग लगाने की वजह से देखिए एक ब्रेक वाहन और गार्ड का और उसके बगल का एक जो हम कह सकते हैं कि स्लीपर क्लास है, वो बोगी जल गई है।
Even kids were not spared. A school bus was stuck in Darbhanga due to the protest. BJP netas have also been facing fury over Agnipath in Bihar. Protesters pelted stones at Bihar Deputy Chief Minister's residence in Betia. In Madhepura, BJP office was set on fire. National capital Delhi was also on edge. Left-back students hit the streets against Agnipath, demanding that the scheme be immediately revoked.
4 साल के लिए कॉन्ट्रैक्ट पर युवाओं को भर्ती की जा रही है, गुलाम बनाया जा रहा है, उसके खिलाफ हम हैं। हमारी मांग है कि इस योजना को वापस लिया जाए, परमानेंट भर्ती की जाए।
Cops resorted to lathi charge in Narnaul district of Haryana. Internet services were snapped in Ballabgarh. The last 48 hours saw Agnipath fury rage across North India. But on Friday, the fire spread to the south. Big flames and plumes of smoke were seen erupting from trains at the Sikandrabad railway station as angry aspirants resorted to arson. At least 1 person was dead and local police fired 17 rounds in defense.
We are prepared for Indian Army, madam. But from 4 years there is no recruitment, there is no selection. And again now the scheme new entry TOD has implemented. Our exam has been cancelled.
The backlash prompted the centre to raise the age limit for Agnipath military recruitment scheme to 23 from 21 for the current year. Will this be enough to douse the fire, or will the recruitment scheme be smoothened out further? Bureau Report, India Today.
The Agnipath fire, which had been burning in northern states, spread to the south as well on Friday as violent protests erupted in Sikandrabad, the twin city of Hyderabad, at the railway station in Telangana. Hundreds of protesters engaged in violent clashes throughout Friday with the police. One person succumbed to injuries in rubber bullet firing, while several others were injured in the clashes. Here's a report on the most disturbing flashpoint in the protests so far.
Just over 1,500 kilometers from Telangana's capital, Hyderabad, this was the scene in Sikandrabad on Friday morning. Trains were set on fire. Stones were pelted at cops. Crores of taxpayers' money burnt to ashes. One of the scariest flare-ups claimed at least one life and left over a dozen injured.
Atmosphere turned tense in Hyderabad as student agitators from NSUI started protesting against the Agnipath scheme. They have put fire on a lot of trains, vandalized a lot of public property, hurling stones at police who are trying to control the situation.
Hundreds of protesters stormed the Sikandrabad railway station in protest against the Agnipath scheme. All efforts made by Telangana police to disperse the crowd went in vain. Agitated protesters set shops on fire, damaged whatever came their way. Things were thrown onto the tracks and torched. The protesters' demand was clear: withdraw the new recruitment scheme or face the wrath of unemployed youth.
बच्चों में से सिर्फ 100 बच्चे का मतलब पास हुआ है। इसका मतलब क्या है? कितना मेहनत किया हमने, हमारा मेहनत सब कुछ बुरा हुआ है। अभी उसको डाल के क्या करना चाहते हैं? वेस्ट करना चाहते हैं। हमारा जिंदगी देखो, हमारा फैमिली का जो सिचुएशन देखो कैसे है। इतना 1.5 ईयर से कितना खर्चा होता है। हम हमारा रनिंग पूरा किया और मेडिकल सेक्शन भी पूरा किया, 2 साल वेस्ट भी किया। अभी बोल रहे हैं कि तुम्हारा एग्जाम कैंसिल। क्या हम क्या कैसा बकवास देख रहे हैं क्या हम उसको?
The railway authorities have also stopped the trains owing to the agitators' protest. A huge mob of agitated students continue to shout slogans at the Sikandrabad railway station, and the situation is being trying to put under control by the police. Yet the agitators don't seem to be deterred by their efforts, and they are continuing their protest.
TRS President and State Minister K.T. Ramarao called the protests an eye-opener, saying that the anger was an indicator of the magnitude of unemployment crisis in the country. With Fronia Priscilla in Sikandrabad, Bureau Report, India Today.
Who's fueling the Agnipath fire? The BJP is accusing the opposition of misleading defense aspirants, fanning misinformation about the new Agnipath recruitment scheme. The opposition is saying the protests are proof of the fury of India's unemployed youth. Take a look.
The fearsome Agnipath fire is getting bigger and hotter, with dharnas intensifying into all-out riots and acts of criminal damage to national property. But alongside unemployment woes and a storm of misinformation, politics is flowing thick and fast. With the raging rampage being seen as an opportunity to attack the Modi government. The Congress, already on the streets for Rahul Gandhi, has been forced to deploy its guns for the much more ferocious Agnipath protest.
सरकार क्यों ये नहीं कहते कि हम सैलरी और पेंशन देते नहीं सकते? सैलरी और पेंशन देते हुए हमारे वित्तीय हालात बदतर होते जा रहे हैं। इसलिए हम ये पैसा बचाने के लिए हमारा अगले पीढ़ी के जो नौजवान फौज में भर्ती होना चाहते हैं, उनकी भविष्य को लेकर हम छेड़खानी कर रहे हैं।
The Trinamool has also leapt in.
It's a serious matter. Government took a decision on their own. I think it's an ill-conceived program. It will not be acceptable. We shall raise the matter when Defence Consultative Committee meeting comes up.
Bihar, where the violence has been maximum, has seen an even bigger political flashpoint with the BJP's partner JDU.
हमारी पार्टी ने, which is a ruling party in Bihar, और NDLI है, हमने सरकार से मांग की है कि इसको रिव्यू किया जाए और जो यूथ के जो सेंटीमेंट है उनको ध्यान में रखते हुए इनसे बात की जाए.
With train after train burning in Bihar, Lalu Prasad's RJD has called Bihar Bandh on Saturday, sparking a vicious retort from the centre.
ये राजनीतिक दलों के लोगों ने विद्यार्थियों को ढाल बना करके राष्ट्रीय संपत्ति का जलाने का काम किया, बर्बाद करने का काम किया. मैं तो कह दिया कि वहां आरजेडी के गुंडे करा रहे हैं.
But the opposition, usually pulling in different directions, has found itself united by the Agnipath fire. From the NCP to the Akali Dal to Owaisi's AIMIM and even Kapil Sibal, there's a united front against the government over Agnipath. The ruling BJP isn't stepping back though, giving fire to fire on the flaming political battlefield. Linking the farmer stir to Agnipath agitation, UP BJP chief and State Minister Swatantra Dev Singh said the opposition first incited Kisans and now they are inciting Jawans. Big guns from the centre are firefighting with facts and trying to stay away from the political blaze.
केंद्र सरकार द्वारा घोषित की गई अग्निपथ योजना भारत के नौजवानों को देश की रक्षा व्यवस्था से जुड़ने और देश की सेवा करने का एक सुनहरा अवसर देता है. अग्निवीर हूं, यह उनकी ताजिंदगी के लिए पहचान बन जाती है.
ठंडे मन से 46,000 अग्निवीर एक साल, उससे अगले साल फिर 46,000, हर साल 46,000.
The government's other big guns have also been deployed to douse the rage.
उसको पहले साल 4,70,000 की तनख्वाह मिलेगी, चौथे साल जाके बढ़ते बढ़ते 6,92,000 तो औसतन 4 साल में लगभग 20 लाख रुपए उसको सैलरी से मिलेगा. बाकी फौज की सुविधाएं अलग है, जो आपको रहना, खाना, पीना, सर्विस करना वो सारा अलग है.
But the sheer spread of the Agnipath rage has ensured the political fire won't be going out soon. Bureau Report, India Today.